alarmed and panicked, and as though this must be happening to somebody else.
A visitor to Canada says he nearly lost his foot when a flight crew couldn't get him off his plane. Plus,
it's some extras, but we are happy to do it because we're doing for the environment, and our customers are happy with it.
BC expands its ban on single-use plastic items, the benefits and potential costs. And
this time of year is unusual to get as many golfers as we've had.
Warm enough for you? From Cranbrook to Kamloops, Prince George to the South Coast, BC is warm in winter so far because of El Nino and climate change.
I wish it was.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. A British man who visited Canada says he became stranded on a plane in Vancouver for hours when the flight crew said no wheelchair assistance was available for him. Paramedics used the plane's food trolleys to get him out. As Michelle Gassoub reports on the latest in a series of disturbing stories about a lack of accessibility on airlines.
Jeffrey Schneiderman was looking forward to a month-long holiday in BC last summer, but the moment he landed in Vancouver, the trip took a turn.
It was just sheer terror, so I just had to try and close my eyes and pray.
Schneiderman, who has MS and uses a wheelchair, was told by the airline crew the airport didn't have the specialized equipment known as an Eagle Lift, demonstrated in this video, that would help him off the plane. After 2 hours of sitting on the tarmac, British Airways called paramedics for help.
I was then beginning to feel very alarmed and panicked, and as though this must be happening to somebody else.
The paramedics put him on a stretcher, then used 2 of these carts normally used to serve passengers food and drinks to finally get him out.
So they didn't have any way of clipping them or keeping them together other than manually while they were pushing. And I suppose they were doing their best to try and keep me level and on the food carts. But food carts are just not designed to transport people.
The incident left Schneiderman bedridden during his holiday and with a pressure sore that became septic. His foot was so damaged, it came close to being amputated. But the toll of the incident wasn't just physical.
It was just a horror story. I was having panic attacks about it, and panic episodes about being trapped.
Schneiderman is just the latest passenger arriving in Vancouver in a wheelchair to share a harrowing story with CBC News. In April, one passenger was injured as crews struggled to get him off a flight. In May, another passenger was dropped on the floor. This aviation expert says there's a gap in accountability. In Schneiderman's case, a failure to get proper equipment created an especially dangerous situation.
Even with the wide variety of emergency equipment that they have at their disposal, they deemed the best option to be the catering carts on board the aircraft. And that, to me, is very shocking.
And Michelle Gassoub joins us now. Michelle, Schneiderman has gotten some compensation for his ordeal, but there is still plenty of questions.
Yeah, Schneiderman did get a settlement of £1,500 from British Airways. Now, that's roughly $2,500. He says that's not nearly enough to cover the medical costs of what he went through. As for Vancouver International Airport, officials say they do have Eagle Lifts available, but it's up to each individual airline to work with ground crews to ensure passengers can get on and off of planes safely.
Michelle Gassoub, thanks very much. Families of victims from a deadly bus crash in the Okanagan last Christmas Eve say they feel unsatisfied. Prosecutors will not be laying charges in that collision that killed 4 people and sent dozens to hospital. As Leanne Young explains, police say bad weather contributed to the rollover and they can't find anyone to blame.
Kathy Lee, the 18-year-old just trying to get home for the holidays. Karnjot Singh Sodhi, the 41-year-old, a new immigrant about to celebrate Christmas in Canada. Just 2 of the 4 people killed last Christmas Eve and sent at least 3 dozen others to hospital. Their bus rolled over on an icy, treacherous journey from Kelowna to Vancouver. Today, the BC Prosecution Service says it won't be laying charges in the crash. Kawinder Singh is upset. No one will be held responsible for the death of his cousin.
I don't say that the driver fault. But the driver fault, why he did not refuse
with that, I don't go that the weather condition is not good. Yeah, I feel very bad because policeman said that due to the road conditions and the day is very bad, that's why that accident is happened. That driver has no any fault.
The vehicle operator at Calgary's e-bus would not comment. RCMP led the investigation and sent its report to Crown Counsel, which typically includes charge recommendations. But the decision is up to Crown based on the likelihood of a conviction and public interest. In a statement, Mounties say road and weather conditions were contributing factors to the crash. Singh, a commercial truck driver himself, says the province needs to step up.
Every year I saw many of the happens in that area, from Kelowna to Surrey or from Kamloops to Coquihalla. It's not just the driver's fault. It's the fault of the BC government, failure of the BC government. They did not clean the road.
The Ministry of Transportation says contractors were out that night salting and plowing the roads, adding its enforcement agency inspected the bus and sent findings to RCMP, but would not comment further. Little comfort for families like Singh's.
There is no good justice.
Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver Police say a quarter of the arrests they made this year for shoplifting happened in just over 2 weeks. And recently, the department says it made 268 arrests, seized 31 weapons, and recovered more than $100,000 in stolen merchandise between November 30th and December 15th. This year, plainclothes officers arrested shoplifters at about 30 retailers across the city and recovered nearly $300,000 in stolen merchandise. This map shows where police say shoplifting is happening across the city. Most of it is happening downtown. Police on Vancouver Island say a woman has now been charged with forgery and impersonation after she allegedly applied for a nursing job with fake documents. Police say Shari Bell Talau is accused of a forged marriage certificate, Alberta health card, Canadian citizenship certificate, a name change affidavit, and of fraudulently impersonating someone in the name of Eve Engelhart. Investigators say they were contacted by staff at Island Health when Talau applied for a nursing position using suspicious documents. Further charges are possible. Richmond Hospital's redevelopment project has opened its updated cancer center clinic after it was refurbished and moved.
We expect to see in the next 10 years a move from 30,000 cancer diagnoses a year to 45,000. And we need to respond to that by building out a dynamic system that improves cancer care. And
the clinic is part of Phase 1 of the redevelopment project. It's slated to see 1,000 patients a year and will mean less travel for vital cancer care. Phase 2 is set to start this spring, with the entire project set to be done in 2031. Almost all of the 666 international medical graduates registered in BC, meanwhile, this year, are now working as doctors, with more than half in family medicine. This comes amid ongoing healthcare woes like hospital overcrowding, and many people still not having a family doctor. Dick says as many as 700 physicians who weren't practicing family medicine a year ago are now working in the sector. Starting today, your experience at local shops and cafes in BC may be a bit different. In line with the federal government's ban on single-use items, the provincial government is expanding its efforts to tackle hard-to-recycle plastics. As Janella Hamilton explains, the plastics ban is welcome news for many in our province, but it could come with an added cost.
Niaz Tagoli is the manager of Le Petit Belge on Robson Street.
At the moment, we have just paper bags, and we have like to-go cups. Everything is paper.
She says the transition away from some single-use plastics has been relatively smooth, but alternatives like paper bags do cost more.
It's some extras, but we're happy to do it because we're doing for the environment, and our customers are happy with it.
Vancouver is among a list of more than 20 municipalities in BC that have already made the move to ban some single-use plastics. And now the new federal rules will mean businesses across the country are banned from giving out, manufacturing, and importing plastic items like checkout bags, cutlery, food serviceware, stir sticks, and straws, with some exceptions.
Retailers are having to pay more for these items. The second impact is, and in the end, there's likely an impact to consumer prices as well. These price increases coming at a time of high inflation, sure, that makes it very challenging.
In BC specifically, restaurants can no longer offer plastic cup lids, sleeves, condiments, and napkins unless a customer asks. The province says the added layer of rules is an effort to reduce waste and pollution.
We've seen studies recently that say it's not just the plastics ending up in the ocean. They break down, there's microplastics in the air, it ends up in our food, and it ends up in our bodies.
Overall, I think it's a good thing. It's just building that new habit.
I think it's great, to be honest, because I think more and more people are using like tote bags like this or like reusable stuff. I think it makes sense.
The Retail Council says its members are on board, but the timing of the latest rules is not ideal.
Honestly, the focus in most retail stores is sales of for Christmas and not the plastic changes.
The new federal regulations will happen in a multi-phased approach, with more materials being added to the list in the coming months. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
This year's wildfire season in BC was the most destructive ever recorded, and new research shows the fallout is impacting killer whales. A UBC researcher says his team detected toxic chemicals in orcas off BC's coast, the same type of chemicals in oil spills and wildfire smoke. The researchers analyzed muscle and liver samples from 6 transient and 6 southern resident orcas in the Pacific between 2006 and 2018. One expert says the findings are a way to gauge marine environment health.
Killer whales, which are the canaries in the coal mine. The irony that we select this topic as a canary of the coal mine because they're telling us how healthy or how polluted are our marine environment, our food web, and the marine biodiversity in BC.
Research suggests those toxins are carcinogenic and can be transferred from mother to fetus, meaning the impacts can last generations. New data from Statistics Canada shows BC's population is continuing to grow. At the same time, though, the number of people deciding to ditch this province for somewhere else in Canada is also rising. And as Justin McElroy explains, a lot of them are going to one particular province.
More people are leaving BC for the rest of Canada than coming to BC from the rest of Canada, and it's happening at a pace not seen in 2 decades. That's not based on anecdotes, but on data by the federal government. Here is a chart. It shows something called net interprovincial migration in British Columbia over the last 20 years in 3-month quarterly stints. Now, after years of people from across the country coming here, BC has lost people to the rest of Canada over the last 5 quarters. Specifically, there was a net loss of 4,634 people from July to September of this year, and more than half of them are heading to Alberta. Now, a lot of people online speculated why, with many focusing on housing costs. But the BC government says they aren't too concerned, and it's because of a different chart. It shows immigration numbers to BC over that exact same time period. Now, the number of people leaving the province to other provinces is more than balanced out by the number of new immigrants coming to British Columbia in recent years. And that's what the housing minister wants to focus on.
That is some of the highest numbers since 1961. So people are coming. They see opportunity here. They're coming. It's vitally important that we have the infrastructure, the housing, the healthcare, the schools to support that type of growth.
Left unsaid by the minister was whether some people decide that there isn't enough of that infrastructure and housing available and then leave for another province. Questions we might have more answers for in the next 3 months when the next set of numbers come out. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you have an unused gift card to Mastermind Toys, get there quick. It is warning customers those cards will not be valid after Christmas Eve. The company is set to come under new leadership early next year as it wrestles with millions of dollars in debt. Mastermind announced earlier this month it would be closing 18 of its stores across the country, including here in BC. Its liquidation sales will wrap up by the end of February. It doesn't look like a white Christmas will be here for many British Columbians. Temperatures are warmer than usual across much of our province. And as Joel Ballard reports, experts say it's going to stay that way for a while.
It's an uncommon sight. Golfers teeing off at Mount Paul Golf Course in Kamloops days before Christmas.
The weather's nice, so it's good for golfing.
And with no snow, the greens have stayed open.
At this time of year is unusual to get as many golfers as we've had.
It's been a warm December.
Our temperatures have generally been above normal for a really long time.
And not just in Kamloops, but across the province, like in Cranbrook, where it's more slushy than snowy.
No, I'm not much of a skier or a snowboarder or anything like that. I'm sure people who do love that would find it kind of sad, but for me, I just love it.
Kelowna, where the parks are green.
You know, I prefer the milder temperatures. I wish it was like this every year.
Even Prince George, where it's raining.
I really miss the snow. It worked in Canada, you know?
Normally by this time of the year, the Prince George Ice Oval is packed with skaters enjoying the outdoors. But this year, the facility hasn't been able to open.
We had one brief window of opportunity about a week ago where we were doing some flooding. But since then, we've had to stop flooding. There's no point when it's well above zero and raining.
Down in Metro Vancouver, the weather forced the closure of a pair of local ski hills this week, with runs almost as brown as they are white. Environment Canada says the weather should cool a bit by the weekend, but temperatures could rise again next week and will likely persist.
We are entering that time period where El Nino does play a role on our weather here in North America. So what we can expect likely to see from El Nino is a milder than normal winter.
That's not a problem for the golfers back at the course in Kamloops.
It was one day there, it was so frozen, we couldn't get the tees in the ground. And it just so happened that one of the fellows had a drill in the car. So we made a hole and put the tee in, and away we went.
So what could keep them away? Snow. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
A sustained drought that's still being experienced across much of BC is causing power generation issues for BC Hydro. And that means, for the first time, it is having to import power from outside of BC. Hydro says it has pulled more than a fifth of its power needs from other sources, mainly Alberta and the U.S. That has cost the utility hundreds of millions of dollars this year. The spokesperson says it will not immediately affect rates for customers, though. In October, BC Hydro requested a 2.3% rate hike for next spring. The BC Utilities Commission is set to decide on the plan by the end of February. Doris Mondavi joins us now with a first look at the weather. Quite something. Not a lot of snow across our province, Darius.
That's right. Temperatures are pretty much across BC, a little bit warmer than usual. Now in Vancouver, that's especially noticeable. Temperatures around 4 to 5 degrees above seasonal. In many places in the province, it's the same story. For some other places, like parts of the island, it's closer to 2 degrees above normal. But nowhere really I've looked are temperatures cooler than would usually be. So until we have maybe a cold front move in this weekend, expect temperatures to stay pretty high. We won't return to seasonal until at least Saturday or Sunday, at least here on the south coast. Now, let's turn to look at what we've seen across the board, across BC today so far. You can see not too much activity. We don't have any weather watches or warnings to speak of right now, except for a fog advisory for parts of the South Island, because there's just not much activity happening. We have a few weak systems that are rolling in, but not too much to speak of. If we zoom out and look at what is coming, what is still in store, I know some of those systems look like they are going to have a pretty massive impact, but what's coming tomorrow is really just a weak system, and then it's not until Friday that we see maybe some stronger rain move in, and that will push into parts of the interior as some rain and some snow. But for the most part, we're not looking at anything too serious. I wouldn't expect any rainfall or snowfall warnings or anything like that, at least until we get later into the late week. And then conditions across the province tonight looking a little bit warmer than usual, and we got a bit of precipitation, but nothing guaranteed and nothing serious, I think is the message here.
Okay, Doris, we'll check in later. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
The holidays for a lot of people can be a lonely, difficult time. That is why the Canadian Red Cross has a program that pairs volunteers with people struggling with loneliness. Through the Friendly Calls program, trained personnel connect weekly with people on the phone, provide emotional support, and suggest well-being help.
From first, I didn't want to speak to a stranger, because that's, well, how can I confide all my aches and pains and fears to a stranger? Like, from first I didn't feel good, but after the next call, I was waiting for her call.
The Friendly Calls program is free and available to anyone 18 and older nationwide. We're going to take you now to a place where you can connect with someone who's now gone. We paid a visit to a Victoria cemetery and spoke with the woman who's created what's called a Windphone.
A Windphone is essentially a disconnected phone set up somewhere its purpose is to help people connect with loved ones that they've lost. It's not connected to anything, so hence the name Windphone. It's like carrying your words over the wind. The impetus for it was, you know, the loss of my brother and dealing with that really kind of sudden, unexpected loss and feeling lost in how to process that. But I hope that this phone can be used by anyone who's missing somebody. Sitting here in a little secluded wooded area at Royal Oak Burial Park, it's a really lovely spot. You can see the Little Spirits Garden right in front of us. If you were to look kind of out, we're up a little high, and you could see a large part of the more like modern area of the burial park. So connect with someone who happens to be buried here that you've lost. You could sort of get a sense of where you were in the park and maybe see their grave, or just kind of look at the area where you know they are, and that might just help make that connection a little more special. You use it like you would any other phone. We've got a headset here, and there's some buttons, so if you happen to have a phone number you wanted to call, you could do that. And then you just talk. You put the receiver up to your ear and maybe think about the person you want to talk to and just say what you wanted to say to them. Like maybe you're telling them about your day, maybe you're just saying you miss them. There's just something about it that I think just really invites you to pick it up and dial a number and talk to somebody.
Ever wondered why certain memories from your childhood seem like they happened just yesterday? After the break, we're going to tell you more about the impact age has on our memories and how we use them to learn. You'll want to hear this. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. Earlier in the show, we told you about the number of people in BC moving to Alberta because of lower living costs there. Well, as Nicholas Frew tells us, that is driving up rent in cities like Edmonton that hasn't seen a rent hike like this so fast in 40 years.
Brandy Calahoo has always rented. She and her husband have lived in a 3-bedroom bungalow in Edmonton for 5 years now, and watched the rent rise by several $100s.
It just makes things a lot harder. You have to budget better. You have to, be really careful where you're putting your dollars, because it's, you have to have a roof over your head. But then that just means that you have to go without certain things.
Renters in Alberta have to further tighten their budgets, as data shows rent prices are soaring at a rate not seen since 1982. Statistics Canada's Consumer Price Index shows rent in Alberta in October was nearly 10% higher than a year prior. Data from rentals.ca shows the average rent in Alberta is just shy of $1,900, suggesting the province's rental market is still more affordable than in places like Ontario and BC. But rent in Alberta has grown more in the past year than in other provinces.
Every household has their own set of challenges, and I think things will get better. Inflation is certainly going to not stay where it is. I mean, it's already come down significantly.
Dale Johnson says there are multiple factors driving up rent. Interest rates are affecting mortgages held by landlords and property management companies, and inflation is driving up construction costs on new buildings. So Dale Johnson says rent may be going up to help cover those costs as well. In the meantime, he says everyone is looking for affordable alternatives, whether that's getting roommates, living with parents, or even living in a motorhome. Nicholas Frew, CBC News, Edmonton.
You likely know that feeling of hearing a favorite childhood song or seeing a long-lost friend and feeling like you've been shot back in time. But this doesn't happen by chance. In fact, memories are tools that our brains rely on to learn. David Anderson is a professor of museum education and science education at UBC, and he joins us now. David, thanks for joining us. First of all, how do memories, especially those we form in childhood, help us learn?
Thank you so much, Dan. Yes, it's very important to appreciate that as we age and develop, our identities continuously change. And with that, the ways in which we learn and the ways in which we engage with the world also change. So a little example. So as we are children, we tend to play and dress up and make believe, and we explore this world through this understanding of who we are as children. But that changes, of course, as we age. And so the ways in which we engage change as we become teenagers, as young adults, as we go into young adulthood and further our careers and we become aged and get into old age, we change also in the ways in which we change. And that critically influences what and how we remember things.
Now, how does selective memory work? We've heard that phrase before. Why do we remember some things very vividly and others perhaps not as much?
Yes, there's lots of reasons for that, Dan. So, of course, when we have experiences, there's lots and lots of senses which are coming our way that we're processing. And we actually only perceive a very thin transect or component of our surroundings and our environment. So we're constantly filtering things out as we have experiences, and we select things which are important to us or parts of the experience that we deem to be selectively important to us. And so these are the things that later become encoded.
Now, museums, and we mentioned you're a professor of museum education, there's spaces that hold generations of memories. How do you draw upon that as a tool to keep visitors, first of all, going there and then coming back?
Yeah, this is very, very important. Museums are constantly thinking about their audiences and not just the experiences that they have in the museum, but how to continuously reach them after they've left the exit door. And so as we think about these exhibitions and programs and things that we encounter in a museum space, the museums think very critically about how they make connections with the visitor after they've left the museum gallery. So how can they be connected back in their real world? What can be provoked in their thinking to think about what's going on in the classroom, what they're seeing on the media, what they're experiencing as they read books and so on. So making those connections is very, very important. And so the use of, for example, visiting back with the website or connecting back in the classroom is highly important to the way in which we learn and later remember things.
Well, it's certainly the season for memories. We know a lot of people were thinking about a lot of things that they remember from childhood around Christmas and the holidays. David Anderson, professor of museum education and science education at UBC, we appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Have you had the cold, the flu, or even COVID in the last few weeks? If you've been sick, join the club. How healthcare workers are coping with the strain. Next.
Is your neighborhood about to become overrun by extension cords on people's front yards? That's a question that one councillor in Windsor had for city staff as there's this push towards electric vehicles. He's wondering, what do people without a driveway or a garage do to charge their vehicles? And what is the city supposed to do to help them out? Experts say that Windsor isn't alone in trying to find a solution to this, but it is something that needs to be looked at proactively.
We would need to start solving this problem yesterday. And the reason I say that, Chris, is the government of Canada is developing regulations which will require that all new passenger cars be zero emissions by 2035.
And the shift is happening across Windsor, Essex. More than 2,100 electric or plug-in hybrid vehicles are registered to homes in this region. That's up by 500 vehicles since last year. There are dozens of electric vehicle chargers like this one here spread across Windsor, Essex, but studies show people who own these vehicles or are thinking of buying them want to charge it overnight, and they want to do that at home. Toronto ran a pilot project in 2020, putting chargers like these at streets downtown and in residential neighborhoods. They cost $2 an hour to charge between 7 and 8 p.m. with a $3 flat rate overnight. The city says it's a big success. They plan to have 100 in operation by the end of the year, but each one costs $20,000 to install. Vancouver launched a similar pilot, but made residents pay for it.
We found that it was actually quite administratively burdensome and costly for the homeowner, so there wasn't actually very much uptake for it. So that pilot program was sunsetted, and we kind of focused on different options.
One of those options, that's right, extension cords. They license cord covers to get people charged out front, but warn it may not work in Windsor because of snow clearing. One thing experts would like to see cities do, change regulations so new builds anticipate EV charging needs.
The city of Toronto has since required that all new residential developments be 100% EV ready for all parking spots. It's a great way to future-proof any new development and make sure that we can minimize the number of buildings that need to get retrofitted, because that's a really expensive task.
One councillor I spoke with said that they're thinking about pushing for a policy that's similar to that here in Windsor. In the meantime, city staff are considering options on how to move forward, while also looking at ways to install more chargers like these in city-owned parking garages and parking lots. Chris Hensing, CBC News, Windsor.
If you've come down with the flu, a cold, or COVID recently, get in line. Hospitals across Canada are seeing a surge in seasonal viruses. As John Hernandez explains, it's impacting healthcare workers who, after hard pandemic years, are still struggling to keep up.
Sydney Freeston knows it's a bit late to start decorating the tree, but this year she just hasn't had the strength to do it.
Since the end of October, there has barely been a day in which all 4 of the people in my household have been healthy.
Freeston, her husband, and kids all battling a slew of illnesses, from colds to strep throat, even COVID-19.
We're 5 days out from Christmas, and we are nowhere near where we normally are at this time.
Health Canada says cases of respiratory illnesses have been on the rise since mid-November nationwide. In Quebec, transmission is showing no signs of slowing down.
The situation over the next few weeks will deteriorate. Let's be clear about that.
Those without urgent illness asked to stay away from emergency rooms, as many operate above capacity.
We need all the hospitals to be taking away all the pressure from the emergency. When we reach 200%, we know it's not safe.
Other provinces like BC and Ontario say they are faring better, but aren't immune to health worker shortages.
This is unheard of for emergency doctors to call in sick.
About 22,000 people of the couple of 100,000 who work in the healthcare system who missed at least one day last week.
And with COVID added to annual cold and flu seasons, medical experts say these intense waves of sickness may be the new normal. And annual flu shots and COVID boosters are more important than ever.
We have to have surveillance that shows us what the burden of respiratory infections actually is in our communities, and we have to be able to make individual but also collective decisions.
Health officials say those decisions can be as simple as masking up or sanitizing your hands. But most importantly, if you are sick, just stay home. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
It is big business and a growing problem. Every year, thousands of companies are hit by ransomware attacks. Worldwide, it's estimated to cost $11 trillion a year. Now Canada and other countries are pushing businesses to just say no to cyber criminals. The CBC's Jonathan Gatehouse takes a look at one Canadian company that did just that.
It was a hot, dry day in southern Ontario, but inside the Weather Network's headquarters, a storm was brewing. Computer systems were frozen, all data unavailable, leaving viewers and app users across the country without temperatures, maps, and forecasts. Technicians scrambled to find the problem. Then, the ransom demand arrived.
Well, September 11th is when kind of hell broke loose.
An email threatening to divulge sensitive corporate information on the dark web unless the company paid an astronomical price.
It's the first question that people ask you. I'm absolutely certain of it.
Right.
How much was it?
It's in the tens of millions.
The pressure was on to pay to unlock their systems. But Nana Banerjee, the CEO of the network's parent company, made a principled choice, heeding the advice of Ottawa and other governments to just say no to cybercrime.
We considered for a microsecond and just came to the conclusion that you're dealing with criminals. There was no guarantee that they're not going to share your secrets with the rest of the world. So what are you really paying for?
The list of Canadian ransomware targets keeps growing. Bookseller Indigo, grocery giant Sobeys, a group of hospitals in southwestern Ontario. Overall, the numbers are staggering. The gangs behind the attacks so industrious, hackers now strike every 39 seconds, with 560,000 pieces of malware detected each day. No one knows how much money is changing hands, but in Canada alone, it's estimated 70% of targets pay up. With many of the criminals operating beyond the reach of law enforcement in places like Russia and Iran, the big question is, how do you stop them? Dozens of nations, including Canada, recently pledged to halt all ransom payments from government coffers. A hardline approach Canada's cyber czar hopes businesses will embrace too.
Paying ransom is always a very tricky proposition. Paying ransom fuels the ransomware ecosystem that's reinvested by cyber criminals in developing capabilities.
In the Weather Network's case, it took weeks to fully restore and upgrade their systems at a considerable cost. But Banerjee says he's sure the company did the right thing.
Until the cybersecurity preparedness world comes up with better systems of protection, you have to assume this will happen again and someone will try it again.
With potential disaster lurking in every outside email attachment, organizations have learned to be cautious. But changing the mindset of hacking victims from panicked to defiant will surely be a long-term project. Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has responded to U.S. claims that his country is behind efforts to kill critics of his government abroad. Modi says he will look at any evidence of an alleged plot to kill a Sikh leader in the U.S. As Aishan Girg reports, though, this comes 3 months after Modi chastised the Canadian government for making similar claims.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has for the very first time addressed allegations that an Indian official was involved in an assassination attempt on a Sikh activist on US soil. In an interview with the Financial Times, Modi said that this is one issue that India is looking into, but it's not one that's going to derail India-US ties. In the interview, Modi also said that India is deeply concerned about any of the activities of its citizens and added that India-US ties are going from strength to strength. This comes at a time when President Joe Biden has already described India-US ties as one of the most consequential ties in the world right now. This comes even as India has been facing similar accusations from the Canadian government. Just a few months ago, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleged that Indian officials were involved in the killing of a Sikh activist in Canada, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, India has said that it has already constituted a panel to look into the allegations made by by the US. While for Canada, it has said that for several months, Canadian officials were unable to provide the Indian government with actionable intelligence. Now, the Indian government does say that allegations like these have posed a concern because these accusations also mean that Indian government has to take another look at its national security policy as well. Now, analysts say that even despite similar allegations coming from both the countries, India has taken a very different approach in dealing with them. With the US, India has shown that it's more forthcoming with its intelligence and also in taking action. But with Canada, the relationship has taken a different turn. More than 41 Canadian diplomats had to leave India, but with America, the relationship has not soured at all. Now, analysts say that India is largely being seen as a counterbalancing power to China in the region, which is why countries like the US are also not taking a stern approach with India, even despite these allegations. Ashan Garg for CBC News, New Delhi.
A vote at the UN Security Council on a possible humanitarian pause in the fighting in Gaza has been delayed again. The U.S. has reportedly asked for more time. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says talks are ongoing. He also says Israel has an obligation to eliminate the threat posed by Hamas and minimize civilian casualties. But he adds the world is focused on the actions of Israel, not Hamas.
There seems to be silence on what Hamas could do, should do, must do, if we want to end the suffering of innocent men, women, and children. It would be, I think, good if the world could unite around that proposition as well.
Christmas is coming early for many in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Several months ago, the church moved its Christmas celebration to December 25th. It was to try to distance itself from the Russian Orthodox Church, which uses the Julian calendar and marks Christmas on January 7th. As Karen Pauls explains, this will be the first time many in the Ukrainian community will celebrate in December.
At this busy Edmonton community kitchen, they're cooking up some tasty traditional Ukrainian food.
So we need more eggs and stuff too, right?
This week is even busier now that Ukrainian Orthodox Christians will celebrate Christmas on December 25th instead of January 7th.
We should remember our history and come back to our history.
This will be Natalia Vinogradova's first Christmas in Canada. She welcomes the change.
December 25th, it's a truly Christmas for Ukrainian people.
Because of the ongoing war, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky changed the date to abandon the Russian heritage.
3, 2, 1.
At the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Kyiv, this woman doesn't want anything in common with Russia. In Canada, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is adopting the calendar change as of December 20th. In Winnipeg, the Holy Trinity Ukrainian Orthodox Metropolitan Cathedral will celebrate Christmas twice this year, helping families transition to a new tradition.
For generations here in Canada, we've been celebrating according to the Julian calendar. And this is something that is very familiar to us, something very dear and very precious. And so the emotions on this are varied.
Especially for second or third generation Ukrainians like Michelle Kowalchuk.
You know, we have a lot of empathy for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. But on the other hand, for those of us who've been celebrating on the old calendar all of our lives, it's a big change.
It's not just Christmas that will be affected by this change. Easter and other major Christian holidays will also be celebrated earlier. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The results are in. Environment Canada has ranked the top 10 climate stories of the year and is looking ahead to what 2024 has in store. We'll have that story next.
Back home, we really love Christmas in the Philippines. We try to carry this here. It takes a lot of passion, patience, and patience. It's my dream. It's my ultimate dream to build one. As far as I can remember, since I was a kid, whenever we put up a Christmas tree, I always assort those cardboards that not being used in the house, and I try to make Christmas houses underneath our Christmas tree. And then when I came here in Canada, 13 years ago, I was so amazed to see that there are some ceramic pieces like this. So it's quite expensive though, so I started looking at thrift store. We start buying them because it's cheaper than the brand new ones, so it grows. I have more than 100 buildings, and then people, I don't know, they're like mushrooms. They propagate quickly. We build it with the family, with my children and my wife. So we love Christmas so much.
I don't like too much things around me, and knowing that he has that much stuff made me think like, what am I gonna do if I see that every time I wake up? I got used to it, I guess.
This will take a long time, I said. I would say 5 months, an hour or two a day, and full day on my days off. Juggling around with the work and family is it's not easy in Canada, but we try to make time with the family. Actually, that is the real meaning of Christmas. Family togetherness, and it's easier when we do things together.
I still love Christmas as it is, and I've grown to like it even more than when I was younger.
My wife is already bothering me. When are you going to dismantle this? Maybe February, she said, but we might leave it for another year. We'll see. Yeah. We build something that makes us happy.
Environment and Climate Change Canada has announced its top 10 Canadian weather stories for 2023. Unsurprisingly, the record number of wildfires across the country took top spot, followed closely by the days and weeks of many Canadians being engulfed in that wildfire smoke. In third place this year was the hottest summer on record, not just in Canada, but around the world. Environment Canada says the writing was on the wall last winter, and conditions are looking even drier to start 2024.
So my sense is that, boy, we need the precipitation in many parts of Canada, not so much the east, but clearly in the west and the north.
The need for precipitation doesn't mean it will happen, though. This is the first El Nino winter in 8 years, which promises much milder conditions than usual. Environment Canada anticipates the prairies and the north will be hit the hardest. Our science and climate specialist Darius Madavi joins us now for a first look at the weather. And yes, remember back to those days and those months, Darius. It was unpleasant, especially, of course, for the people who were forced out of their homes.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, I always look forward to seeing the top 10 weather stories of the year. What really grabbed me this year is how widespread the weather events that took the top 3 spots were. Like you said, Dan, we had fires, smoke, and heat. This was felt really across Canada. It wasn't just in one part of the country, whereas usually these top 10 weather events include things like tornadoes and hurricanes that really affect just one part of Canada. But BC especially was in the hot seat this time. I mean, no pun intended, given the fact that we were actually 5 of the weather events. We had the fires, the heat, the smoke, all of which hit BC particularly hard. Then there was the BC drought that also affected parts of the prairies, And then we had the cold snaps that happened this past winter. In January, we felt a particularly nasty one here in BC. So definitely, we made the highlight reel, I guess, but not in a good way. But let's turn to the current weather. If you take a look, you can watch the next few fronts move through the province here. This is just a more zoomed in version looking at more closely at the province. You can see plenty of precipitation on the way, but none of it, except for parts of the north coast, hitting too strong. We do have plenty of snow breaking into parts of the interior, especially overnight when temperatures are cooler, because for the next couple days we are quite a bit above seasonal, which we'll see in a second. Now, if we look at our accumulation map, this is where we see that things aren't too intense unless you are on the north coast right by the water, because Prince Rupert does get quite a bit of rainfall over the next 48 hours. But across the board, other than that, not looking like too bad, just some light flurries and showers, including here on the south coast. The most we're seeing is really on the west coast of the island, as you'd expect. The east coast of the island pretty much spared, very little rainfall at all. I do want to point out this model is saying very little rainfall for Vancouver. Other models are very much split on this, because they are saying either we're going to get a lot of rainfall very early in the morning Friday or none at all, and it all goes into the valley. So we're going to have to wait and see on that one, as we'll see. But in terms of temperatures, we do have some cooler Arctic air heading down into the province, bringing temperatures down considerably over the next few days. And although we don't see it here in Vancouver, the temperatures do come down even more later in the weekend and into early next week. In terms of conditions, it looks bad, but again, these are just scattered and isolated, short-lived showers for the most part. I do want to highlight we do actually have some snow possible for the local mountains on Friday, when we do start to see those temperatures drop and precipitation potentially move in. And lastly, here we go for the 5-day forecast. I just want to emphasize once again, temperatures coming down, and as I mentioned before, potential for some pretty strong showers early Friday morning, but should ease off as we get later in the day.
Okay, and Darius, before we go, this is your last forecast with us before you take a well-earned break for Christmas. All the best to you and your loved ones. Have a great holiday. Merry Christmas, pal.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. It's been a blast.
Cheers. Well, Cape Breton boy is helping his community get into the holiday spirit. The 7-year-old wanted to earn some cash to buy Christmas gifts for his family. So as Aaron Potty shows us, he headed into the woods with a saw and a little help from Grandpa.
There's a new tree lot on the block, and the person running it, well, he's quite the salesman.
I want people to know that they're really big and they're nice and fresh.
For the past few weeks, Michael McNeil has been in the woods with a small saw, cutting down trees to be sold at his business, Mike's Fresh Cut Trees. The small lot can be found behind his grandparents' house in Westmount. Customers have the choice of trees ranging from small, tall, full, or skinny. So who's picking out the Christmas trees?
Me.
And what do you look for in a good Christmas tree?
Porcupines.
Yeah.
Big.
Kim McNeil is Michael's mom. She says her son's business has been a great learning experience and even led to Michael opening his own bank account.
Yeah, him and his Poppy go up to the woods, and he's been showing the Poppy the trees, and Poppy's been kind of giving him some supervision with the saw and letting him cut them down himself. So we have all kinds of funny pictures of Michael under trees and that, but he's learning a lot about being in the woods and about budgeting his money and earning money. So
the 7-year-old not only picks out the trees, he also comes up with the pricing. So you know what to look for in a good Christmas tree?
Yeah.
Michael says he carries trees over to his customers' vehicles. And just how does he plan to spend his money?
To get my family Christmas presents.
Billy and Clara Forrest say their grandson sold a few trees last Christmas and became hooked.
Last year he had a few trees to sell, right? So he couldn't wait for this year. I think he wanted to start selling in September. Yeah. So, like I said, it doesn't surprise me when he wants to make money. It's just a natural for him.
For Michael, going out into the woods is a cold job, but one he's prepared to do. And if he ends up making some extra cash, well, he's saving up for a dirt bike, although his family says it may take a few dozen more trees before he gets there. Aaron Potty, CBC News, Westmount.
Coming up, I should say, another story of a young man who's found a passion for something that brings cheer and joy. We meet the card king of Nova Scotia right after this. It's a tradition that is fading away, but many people still enjoy getting a Christmas card this time of year. A 12-year-old boy in Nova Scotia is particularly fond of giving and receiving them. As Kayla Hounsell shows us, he's now on a mission to send out thousands.
Joey Connolly spends a lot of time in this exact spot.
Hours.
Why?
Because I love it.
It's as simple as that. Joey just loves making cards.
He's loved cards since he was a toddler. It's just what brings him joy.
But earlier this year, Joey wasn't experiencing any joy at all. He lives with autism and was being bullied at school. Everything changed when his parents posted on social media inviting people to send him cards for his 12th birthday. He received hundreds.
It was 8 weeks solid of mail. Every day for 8 weeks, there was mail in that mailbox from anywhere from BC to Newfoundland, sometimes Australia. You're on the cover of that one. Yeah, it turned me into a card.
He's now known as the Card King.
And he was laughing again. It just brought back the spark, the light in his eyes.
For Christmas, he wanted to make 1,000 cards, his favorite number. Now they've made more than 3,000, sending them to schools, seniors' homes, social enterprises, and more.
We did Snoopy, we did SpongeBob. We just had a lot of fun with it. It was a really good time for Joey and I to spend time together.
And then came the offer from Carlton Cards for next year.
Joey's going to be able to design a custom card that will be printed out. All the 6,000 cards that he wants to do will all be taken care of.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Sometimes he delivers the cards himself. This is a group of adult learners.
For Joey to want to come here to participate in this with us means a lot because a lot of our learners have struggled throughout their lives.
Long after his birthday, he's still finding surprises in the mailbox. His mother says the cards give him confidence. They've also improved his reading.
I am so proud of him to come from a very dark place to a place where he's content and he's happy and he's calm and he's just my silly, goofy Joey.
As he mails off the last batch, his mother hopes Joey's story will inspire others living with autism to explore their interests, whatever they may be. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Marshalltown, Nova Scotia.
Good on you, Joey. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch our newscast on CBC Gem, the free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. I'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.